I just worked to kind of distract myself from that feeling. In the last 7 years before I left home, it was right after my mom died, and then everything kind of started to fall apart in all areas of my life. And I just was miserable, and I was really suffering, and my mental health really went downhill, and all my relationships were suffering. And then I felt like I was screaming, like, how come nobody can see me? Like, I'm drowning here in front of everybody. Nobody can see me.
Hi, you're listening to On Your Terms with me, Hayley Ryan. This is the show where two people get honest about the messy reality of choosing yourself. No scripts, no performance, just real conversation about self-abandonment, boundaries, and what it actually looks like to live on your own terms. So let's get into it.
Hi, welcome to this week's episode. I'm joined by Suri, who is a licensed clinical social worker and the founder of After the Burn Co. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's an honor, and thanks for having me.
Wicked. So let's start at the very beginning. So you essentially left a religious community. You left your marriage. Travel back in time and tell me what events led up to that, and what sort of patterns of self-abandonment you were experiencing at that time.
Thanks. So a lot of people ask me like, "Oh, what was the turning point or what was the one thing?" And I would say it was the 17 years.
Wow.
That was the turning point. So many things stacked up on top of each other, and a really kind of exponential abandoning of myself. Like, the more I abandoned myself, the even more I abandoned myself. Like, the more I did, the more I took on. And it started definitely from, in my childhood, I definitely, I would say, the emotional neglect child. I was like golden child, did everything right, made everyone happy, kind of tried to keep all the peace so everything would keep on going. And I kind of just had that natural, easy way of making people feel good and getting things done. Anything I touched kind of turned to gold. So I was very reinforced of like being perfect and being wonderful and everything. And so when I got married very young at 20 years old, that's very common in the community that I came from. Right away, you're expected to have children, and my ex at the time was studying in yeshiva. That's what they do all day. They study like the Torah, the Bible. And I started working, and we basically were everything we touched turned to gold. So the more things we did, we got a lot of, respect and appreciation and success. And so the more I did, the more I was expected to do, and the bar just kept going higher and higher. And I definitely enjoyed that like identity of like I am the one that can do things and I can help people. So between my own family, I had 5 kids within a span of 8 years. I took care of my siblings in a lot of ways. I became a mentor for lots of teenagers in the community. I ran several businesses. I was a therapist, and then I opened a school that scaled enormously from 25 to 700 students over
Wow.
the 10 years. So I was managing 150 staff members. I was doing nonprofit work. The more I did, the more I took on and the more I was able to do. And it was like, oh, if you ask a busy person, they'll get it done. So we were the busy people and we got it done. And even as I started to suffer, like my mental health, my physical health, I just kept pushing through because I could do anything. And that was my identity. And it
Yeah.
took 17 years of like pushing way past what any normal human can do to disintegrate so badly to the point where I had no choice but to save my life, to walk out the door and go into treatment.
Wow.
So that's really, it was no like one moment. It was so many years on top of it that even as my body and my mind were protesting, it was like, I'm going to overpower this. I'm going to try harder. I'm going to do better. And it took until I knew that if I stayed one more day, I would die.
That's powerful. That obviously, like you mentioned the fact that you felt like you were the person that could do anything. That was your identity. Where do you think that came from?
It definitely stemmed from my childhood, from being the golden child, and there was a lot of things that we had to kind of keep secret and cover up around mental health.
Right.
And I was really good at kind of like hiding that by like shining and being successful and being proof that our family was normal and just covering things up and just learning how to do that and learning how to handle things. And I heard things, saw things, interpreted things so fast, so well that I just kind of like always had the answers and always knew how to figure things out and always, just a little bit of effort went a really long way. And so
Yeah.
that was constantly reinforced. And I just knew that was who I was.
And do you feel like, obviously, you say you knew that was who you were, but do you feel like people were projecting that onto you as well because you were like the consistent one, the one that could do anything, the one that was fixing things? Were people kind of coming to you and expecting you to have all the answers as well, and that kind of played into it?
Absolutely. Definitely started with the family and then my family of origin. And that was my role. Like, ask Suri. Suri knows how to do this. Oh, Suri, you can do that. Um, it was just, I had the answers. I was a therapist. So then, like, I understood emotion. So I knew, okay, you be the one to talk to this person. You be the one to talk to that person. And no was never an option. Like, even if I wanted to say no, it was never really received because it was like, well, somebody needs help more. Well, someone that person's really going to suffer if we don't help them. And there's like, I felt like I had so much, I had so many blessings. I have to do things for other people. The thought of doing anything for myself definitely was a selfish thing. That's a message that I had gotten over the years.
Yeah. And how did that sort of relate to you being a therapist? Could you see that sort of the patterns that you were stuck in were unhealthy, or were you kind of blinded to it at the time?
So I knew that I wanted to be a therapist so I could kind of like fix the future, so to speak,
Right.
because I knew what it was like to grow up and not feel seen. And I knew that, like, in school, I had just been like completely not seen as a person. And I wanted to fix that. I wanted to say, like, let's help the children so they grew up to be healthy parents so that they can parent their children in a healthy way. I wanted to fix everything that I hadn't gotten, but I didn't know that my adult self was doing things in such a broken way. I thought, like, I'm going to be the best parent. I'm going to be the best adult. I'm going to help so many people have a better life. And that was who I was. It was, I'm going to change the world and fix it for everybody. I never looked at myself and said, what could I do for myself or what could I fix for myself? Like, that wasn't an option. It was like, I'm going to fix everyone else, save all these lives, and that's gonna cure me.
That's an immense amount of power, like, and responsibility to put on one person's shoulders.
Yes, it was too much. But at the time, it was like, I can do this. I can do this. And there was constant proof and reinforcement. Every time I did something and I saw I made such a big difference in somebody's life, or, when it came to my own family or family members and my extended family, and I was kind of expected to the point of save people's lives. Like, if they were suicidal or in a really bad way, and I would come in and help, and not obviously, there was medical intervention or psychiatric intervention in a lot of ways too, but it was a lot of like, I'll keep the peace, I'll keep the mood, I'll cheer them up, I'll make things better, I'll get them the help they need, I'll get the resources they need, you know different nonprofit work connecting people. And so I was seeing how much of an impact I was able to make, and it felt really good.
Yeah, I can imagine. So did anybody kind of try and help you the way you were helping them, or like did you resent people for not stepping in and helping you, even though you felt like you could do it all and it was your responsibility?
I'll say for the first um, 30 years of my life, probably until I was about 30 years old, no one would ever have offered any kind of help, neither would I have wanted it. Like, I did not need help. I was the helper. Nobody would ever look at me and say, like, oh, what does she need? Because you can see that I had everything.
Yeah,
And I felt the same way, even though deep underneath there was always like this like heavy feeling pulling me down. I just worked to kind of distract myself from that feeling. In the last 7 years before I left home, it was right after my mom died, and then everything kind of started to fall apart in all areas of my life, and I just was miserable, and I was really suffering, and my mental health really went downhill, and all my relationships were suffering, and then I felt like I was screaming, like, "How come nobody can see me? Like, I'm drowning here in front of everybody. Nobody can see me." And in any way that I did try to either confide in people in a very little ways or be more real, that backfired really quickly. And so
Mhm.
I learned to keep up all the appearances, and I started going to therapy at the time. But there was never anyone who would look at me and say, "Hey, are you okay? Like, what do you need?" That was not a thing. And so at that point, when I was really, really struggling, then I started to look around me and be like, where are the adults? Where were they? Where's anybody? Where's anyone else? Why does nobody ever see me? Like, that's when I started to like really do the work and see, oh, I am a person. I matter. I care. It took until about 30 years old to even like have that thought in my head.
Wow. And you didn't leave until 37, did you? So what happened in
No.
those sort of 7 years?
Those were the glory days. In those 7 years, so my mental health started to really suffer. I The reason why I even went to therapy was because I got to the point where I was so anxious. I had twins. My twins were born about 6 months after my mom died, and that was a really rough time when she was dying. Mostly around like supporting my siblings and keeping up, like being the spokesperson in a lot of ways for all the people that would ask a lot of questions, and continuing to build my school and show up all the time with like the professional face and doing everything right. I was really sick from the pregnancy. So the time I was done with that, and then my twins were born, the school was growing really quickly. We also ran a day camp and a nonprofit. So there was so much happening. My body started to react, and I got so anxious. I literally could not stand up because I was like overpowering the anxiety with like work, 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 keep busy, do more, do more, do more. To the point where there were so many responsibilities on my head, budgets of millions of dollars, hundreds of students, people's lives and livelihoods all depending on me, that it was like I just kept trying to push it out, but it was taking a toll on my body, and I was like doubled over with anxiety. And I said to a friend, I said, I need to talk to somebody. I can't do this anymore. And she said, okay, I had been a therapist with her. So she said, why don't you call so and so? Because that was someone that we had worked with in the agency I worked with before. And I called her, and she said, come on over. We made an appointment. And after that first appointment, I called her and I said, I need more. So I started seeing her twice a week. And then for the next 6 years, I was in therapy twice a week. I tried all kind of medications. I tried all kind of everything that you can do to really help yourself in terms of mental health. Yoga, exercise, journaling, art, movement, going to the beach, taking breaks, going on solo trips myself just to sit by the ocean for days on end, marriage therapy, everything that like I would go to therapy for my kids, even to like help them be the best parent, to help them, because I knew that like I didn't want them to live like how I did, and I knew that because I was struggling that like it would be impacting them. And I took my son to language therapy and OT. Like I was the super mom running this school, working sometimes 15-hour days. And then as my body like suffered more and more and more, I was stuck in bed more, but still pushing myself, showing up with high fevers, and just pushing, pushing, pushing through, but also like on the other hand, trying everything to help my body. Like I learned how to play some instruments, like anything that I could think of. I started horseback riding, anything I can try to like help myself. But I was still in this environment where I was constantly like being pushed and pushed and pushed. And if I tried to slow down, it wasn't really room for that. And I was a public person, so I was always under scrutiny. And when I tried to kind of have more freedom in the religious sense, there was a lot of pushback on that, and like things kind
Right.
of started closing in on me. So the more I struggled, the harder I tried to like out hack myself in like, okay, so I can't pull myself out of bed to go exercise. So I hired someone to come to my house to train me because I knew I'd be forced to wake up because I would never miss an appointment. I wouldn't let somebody
Yeah.
down. So I figured out how to get myself to do this wellness thing, and like I forced myself to do hot habits. Like I read Atomic Habits and productivity books to do wellness habits. So I was like very productive at doing my wellness habits. So
So,
I
so,
tried all kinds of ways.
so you were basically trying to hack the self abandonment patterns by creating more self abandonment in effect because you were trying to be more productive and
Exactly. I would
wow.
schedule rest. I would go on trips that were like, okay, this is a closed, time. I can't do anything. I would make rules while I was away, rules for setting boundaries. But everything was so like a system for everything, a program for everything. I hired a coach to help me delegate more so that I would have more time. But really, it was like, let me do the coach's exercise and let me do that. Let me do this right. Let me do that right. It was just more and more things to do right and do better. And I started to ask for help more and more, but by then, me saying I need help kind of didn't really have any meaning. Me saying I can't do something didn't have any meaning because I always looked like I could. And even when I had said I can't, I still ended up doing it anyways. So
Yeah.
that was the breakdown over all those years, until I said, I can't do this. I need to go to like real treatment because I can't. I think I'll lose my mind. Like I at the end, I already just really wanted to die. Like it was very like passive suicidal thoughts of like, please, like I don't want to wake up in the morning, or like when I would sit by the ocean, like maybe I can just keep on walking until I disappear into the sea. Like
Wow.
constant, like, this is never going to be over until I die. Let's just like let this be over already. Like I would never hurt myself, but I just wanted it to all end
Yeah.
so badly.
Wow. That's a lot. And you know when you were doing the self care, like you mentioned about the horse riding and like the yoga, the journaling and things. Were you doing that because like you were kind of knowledgeable about the fact that other people do that for self care, so that's what you should be doing, or did you do that because it was actually something that brought you joy?
It did bring me a lot of joy. All those things did. And when I was in therapy, I was really like learning, oh, I have a self, what a concept. And that kind of made things difficult because a lot of people find this when they start to choose themselves and set boundaries, and it causes a lot of friction with the relationships around them because people are
Yeah.
not used to that and they're not used to. So that was definitely a huge thing for me, which is like, wait a minute, my identity as being like the good one and always saying yes and everything really kind of got lost right away. And suddenly I
Mm.
was everything that I believed that if I'm perfect, I'm loved, and if I'm not loved, was reinforced. Like I saw it happening in real time.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, I'm still not going to be perfect and I'm not going to be loved because I just can't do this. So it's fine. So fine. So I'm alone. Okay. And I lived in a very like, it's okay. So people hate me. They don't like me, like especially like at work I was the boss and I set a lot of boundaries, and if I had to fire staff or if I had to just say no to people that were so used to me saying yes to, like I was like I couldn't care at that point
Yeah.
because it was like I just couldn't do it. Like I pushed so far past what I could do that I just started, learning how to say no and speaking up for myself. And I lost basically like a lot of relationships. But trying out these things did feel really good. I was like, oh, wow, I love doing yoga. I love moving my body. I love horses. Like, I loved animals. I wanted a dog, but it was an acceptable thing in the community. So I couldn't do that. Even riding a horse was like, you know, kind of had to do everything privately. Make sure nobody sees me, constantly like looking over my shoulder because if I'm like there's a lot of rules in the community. So if I'm at the
Yeah.
ocean, I'm wearing like my skirt and long sleeves and covering my hair. And so like if I ever like try to have a little more freedom, like I was looking over my shoulders and making sure that nobody would see. I really enjoyed doing all those things. And like in those moments, it felt really good. And that's where I think I told myself, like, oh, I'm healing. And in certain ways, I was getting a lot of insight and finding little tiny moments of joy But when you're in a toxic environment, no matter what you do, like all those things, they're just like momentary reprieves, really. They
Yeah.
don't, you can't really heal when you're in a toxic environment because it's like putting band aids over bullet wounds.
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. And obviously your marriage was tied to the community. So when you actually decided to leave, did you kind of did it take you a while to kind of weigh things up, as in like, well, I'm leaving a marriage, I'm not just leaving a marriage, I'm leaving community and I'm leaving this and everything else? Or was it kind of like a, no, I can't go on like this, I need to just get away from it all?
So there was a point probably about 3 years before I left where I got to the point where I was like, I can't keep on doing this. I need a way out. I'm not going to survive so much more time of this. And it was like my brain started thinking of different exit strategies, but it was
Yeah.
a very long term thing. It was like, okay, when my youngest is 18, because then they're like old enough. And my first few kids had to get married because, like, in the community, if the family's divorced, like it's much harder for the kids to get like good marriage prospects and everything. So I was like, I don't want to ruin my kids' lives. I don't want to ruin their chances. So I'll wait until the first three are married, and then like they'll will be considered that they already made good matches, and so then the twins will have an easier time hopefully by then. Like there's a lot of calculations. There was a lot of divorce is not an easy thing in our community, especially we were very public people. Like that was not anything that I could really pull off. Not keeping the same level of religion again, it like you can't do that in that community. It's like this is how you are. You can't kind of. I wasn't able to live my own lifestyle at all. Like staying in the community, not like being married and like even for my kids, I was like, I can't do this to them. I can't do this to them. So it was just a matter of figuring out how to survive in this situation enough days until all these years could pass.
Wow. So
And
even at your lowest point, you were still putting everybody else's needs above your own.
yeah, I never considered actually leaving. I never considered um doing it. Like I was like, okay, when my twins are 18, like that was my plan. And some days I would show up in therapy and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I can't. I need to run. I just need to run and run and run. And there was a constant feeling in my body, run, 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 run. Like I felt like I need to rip my skin off and run. Or I felt like, please, I have to not wake up. Like it was so, so desperate, but I never made a decision to leave my community, to leave my marriage, to leave the home that my kids live in. I made a decision one day to save my life. I made a decision that I wanted to live. And I knew that if I stayed one more day, I would die in some way, either like actual death, because I knew that like I would lose my mind and I don't know what I would do, or I would completely shut down and just lose the last like snip of myself and say like the only way I can survive is if I become a robot completely. And I said I want to live. I want to find a reason to live. I want to have meaning in my life because if my whole purpose is just to survive for my children, that makes their whole purpose just to survive for their children and their children's, and that doesn't make any sense to me. That
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. So I chose to save my life. And that was going into treatment. I went into treatment, residential treatment, and then to PHP, to IOP, to outpatient. For 10 months, I was a full time patient. And while I was there, living in different places and different like mental health rehab facilities, doing the work for, a lot of relational trauma, religious trauma, PTSD, complex PTSD, depression, anxiety, really trying to figure out what everything was. I realized in a few weeks that if I go back, I will not survive. And I realized that the environments that I was living in were killing me and that I could never go back. I didn't make any choice then about the religion. I didn't make a choice then about the marriage. When I walked out, I was just going to save my life. And as I was there, I said, okay, I need to move to a different city. We need to have a different lifestyle. We need to have a much less rigid religious lifestyle. Like there's so many things that would have to change in order for me to survive. Um, Not all of those options were available to me.
Yeah.
So when I realized it was either go back into the world that I came from with a lot of rules. Like, I can't have any friends that aren't Jewish. I have to dress exactly the way that I had before. I still couldn't have a dog. Like, those things that I knew like would help me. I couldn't move to any out of town. Like, it would have to be at exact life. I knew that I couldn't do that, and I knew that I couldn't go back. I did try to move closer to where my kids are in the New Jersey area. It did not work for me. I had terrible experiences. My nervous system just doesn't do well there. It's part of it is the weather. Like, I live in Florida now. I need the sun, I need the ocean, I need the
Right.
much slower pace of society,
Yeah.
but also like I have a lot of privacy and freedom here that I don't have up there. Um, and the choice to leave the marriage took a lot of healing, because there's a lot of trauma bonding, and there's a lot of history, and there's the choice to leave the community kind of happened. I knew I was leaving, and I was leaving that community, and then kind of slowly over time figuring out like where I am in terms of my religious observation. And like at this point I'm not religious, but it took many, many months. It wasn't just okay, forget it, I'm throwing that away. It was like a lot of, I'm a philosopher, I'm a deep thinker, I'm an analyzer, and I'm also emotional. So a lot of like, and I'm still like searching like, what is the truth? What is the meaning of life?
Yeah.
What is the purpose? And and figuring these things out for myself, because I never was able to ask myself those questions. It was never, who am I? What do I believe? It was like, this is what you do. This is who you are. This is what you're taught. All our beliefs were, dictated. There was laws about everything you do. So I, became a person in the world and was like, okay, how do I live regular, normal life out here? And, over those like processes slowly, that's where I came to the point of like, I don't live in the community. I chose to get divorced. I don't live where my children live. Most of the people in my old life will not talk to me. The word on the street is I'm brain damaged. I lost my mind. I snapped.
Wow.
That's the way that I'm explained, because you're not supposed to leave the community. And like it must be that I'm brain damaged or mentally ill, and lost my mind. I did lose my mind. I lost that mind, and I found my own new beautiful mind that is slowly developing over time.
And how does that feel?
It feels like breathing life for the first time. It feels like watching a child like learn their first steps and their first taste, and like delighting at different things. That's what it feels like watching myself in the world.
Wow. That's amazing. I love that description. That's amazing.
Yeah. It doesn't take away the tremendous grief that I live with all the time. And sometimes when I talk about like the happiness, the joy I found, the meaningful connection, the peace that I have, I feel guilty almost like saying that, because it's like, but I also lost so much, and I lost like the regular mothering that I used to do on a regular basis. There's so much loss. There's so much loss of so much relationships, of status, of success, of my career, like everything that I worked on there. Mostly it's the loss of like being able to tuck my kids in every single night. That's the
Yeah.
biggest loss for me. But both things are true.
Yeah, and
That joy.
it's interesting, isn't it? Because we tend to forget that when when we change and when we grow and when we're brought more peace and joy, it's tends to be as a result of loss. So there's
Yeah.
like, and most of the time people focus on the joy and the happiness and the peace that it brings rather than grieving what they've kind of left behind. And I would
Yeah.
imagine obviously for you it's even worse because it's not like you can just completely detach yourself from that situation and that environment because you've got your children to think about as well, and you don't want to
Yeah.
sever that connection, do you?
No, I go see my kids every couple weeks. I fly into New Jersey, and I spend time with each of them separately, and then like I speak to them pretty much every night. We FaceTime and talk. But when I do go back to the community, I do need to like dress, with like a long skirt and long sleeves and everything, and cover my hair in some way. Um, and that's their life. They still live in the community, and so a lot of the things that I do kind of are also like around them, and are dictated by, even like agreements of things that certain ways that I have to do. But yeah, it's not like a grief of like a loss where like time heals and you move on or whatever, or like
Mm,
loss of relationship where it's like, okay, but I see, you know, because I did lose a lot of relationships that like I mourn, but like I don't like look back and be like, oh, like I want to go back to that or I
yeah,
miss that in that way. Like it is lost, but it's like, okay, like I see all the benefits of it with my kids. There's constant re grieving every time I leave them.
yeah,
If ever like they're sick or like I miss like any kind of milestones, anytime I walk away, I hug them goodbye every single time, every few weeks. It's like my heart breaks again. Like any mother leaving her kids for a period of time, that's how they feel. Like there's some nights when I lay in bed and I just cry and cry, like my babies,
I
like
can
they're my
imagine.
babies, like I laid with them every night, each one of them, even when I was so sick and I just had nothing left and I just wanted to die. Like I would just lay there and be present with them. I couldn't even like get up a lot of times because I was so depressed. So like they would come to me each one at a time for their time and I would cuddle with them and sing to them and hold them. And I like did that their whole lives, until I had to go because I chose to live. And it's very, very painful. It's a loss that I'm always gonna live with.
Yeah,
But also at the same time, I know that I am giving them the best version of myself when I do see them. I
yeah.
know that, I'm giving them hope for a future where they have choices in their life. And I'm definitely modeling taking care of myself and doing the things that I would want them to do for themselves.
And are they old enough to kind of understand why you've made the choices you've made, and or is that a conversation that you need to sort of have with them in the future so they do understand?
There's both. They are young. My oldest is 17. So we have conversations all the time. Like I talk to them about everything to the extent that they're willing to.
Yeah,
Um, when I say everything, though, obviously in an age appropriate way and in a way that's healthy for them and the lifestyle that they live in. And they live with their father and his wife. They live in the community. They have very rich lives with lots of like love and a community that I built for them. Lots of like
yeah,
big sisters and people that care and love them very much. And I talk to them as much as possible. I talk to them about mental health, about this is like where I need to be for my nervous system and for my health. And that like I talk about to them that it's difficult for me that I can't be there with them without like putting that onto them. That's not
yeah,
their burden to carry, but knowing that it is really painful and that I miss them. And that I'm always thinking of them. Like I talk as much as possible. I talk about environment that didn't work for me and how they you can have their own journeys and make choices that are good for them, but also encouraging them to like within the environment that they're in to like make healthy choices. And that means like in their environment, that means like yes, following a lot of the rules and like respecting certain expectations, but also like asking yourself, what do I want? What do I like? There's a limited amount of what I could discuss with them. And as they get older, each kid gets older, I have more and different
yeah,
conversations with them. But there's a lot of truths I won't be able to talk to them about, things they'll have to discover for themselves, um, when they're adults. And that's okay.
yeah,
Like for me, even if they don't understand me, I work very hard for them to be able to understand that it's there's the all the choices that I make are with them in mind, even if it doesn't look like that.
yeah,
That it's not like anything that they did or could do or anything like that. Like it's like I'm choosing to be as close to them as possible, to spend as much time with them as possible. And this is what it looks like for me.
yeah. And it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because obviously, especially coming from a situation that you've come from, your experience of that community and the situation is going to be completely different to their perception of it. And you don't want to kind of taint that, do you? So, like you say, you want to let them figure things out for themselves and experience life from their lens rather than from what you've told them.
Absolutely. And I think it is maybe hard for people to understand sometimes, but what was toxic relationships and environments for me, they have a very different relationship and environment than I did. Like
Yeah,
my position, my people, my community, everything, like the relationships that I had is very, very different from the life that they're living, the tools that they have been given, the abilities that they have. Like they just as people, like I get such a kick out of like watching them, not toe the line and not follow rules in a way that's like smart and like, just kind of just get away with it, and they talk back and they speak up, and they'll, you know, be rude, and to like the parents, myself or their father, and I'm like, yeah, because I was always like saying the right thing and being a perfect child. So, you know, giving them as much as possible to like be their own people, even if it's within a community that didn't work for me. It's going to
Yeah.
be their choice. I don't put my own experiences onto them because we have very different experiences.
Yeah, and it sounds like you don't need to either, because it, like, going back to what you just said about them like speaking out and saying what they feel needs to be said, you, in a way, you've kind of put your, like, they've taken your experience as their own and internalized what they needed to, because you've shown them that you don't always have to toe the line, because you've done things slightly different, and that's maybe given them the courage to speak out and have their own
Yeah,
mind.
definitely. They definitely don't go with the same like mindset that I had, which is like everything has to look perfect on the outside and like say all the right things, because their life doesn't look perfect on the outside.
Yeah.
And they have had to figure out how to make that work for them, and they really have, and children are so resilient. It's beautiful to see. But they have a chutzpah, that helps them that helps them get wherever they want in life. They're very good. They have amazing negotiating skills,
Wow.
and they also like definitely developed a certain like intolerance to people's like judgment and ignorance. So when like I started going on social media, there was like talk of like, oh, it's like, there's people that from the community that like kind of, watch everything I do and kind of report back, and there was like a little backlash of like, you're gonna embarrass the kids and like ruin their lives and whatever. And I spoke to my kids. I said, hey, by the way, like I do work on social media. I talk about mental health and healing and my journey. And they're like, okay, cool. It's like, yeah, I'm actually like getting a lot more followers, and some of my reels have a lot of views, and like, oh, that's cool, And then I'm like, I'm sure some people are gonna say stupid things to you, like, oh, I heard your mother's on social media, whatever. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, and you can just be like, and they're like, yeah, who cares? And I was like,
Oh.
who are these kids? Like, that's like the opposite of me. Like, I would have died at that thought in my old life, in my past. And that's beautiful. Like that it was honest, genuine, like, yeah, people have been saying dumb things to them since the beginning of time, because we were public people. Like we would go shopping and hear people talking about us in dressing rooms. Like wherever we went, people were saying things because that's a certain kind of public lifestyle. People are
Yeah,
used to that. And they just got this certain like, okay, well, I'm living my life. You don't like it, do whatever you want. And I'm so grateful that they got that part,
I love that.
because it's like that, and that's how I live my life now. There's people that have all kinds of opinions about things, but I don't care. Like my what works for me and my happiness is like truth. And I've learned, like, I think the most profound thing I've ever heard in the world is when I was in Arizona in residential treatment, and someone said, when somebody talks to you, they're telling you about themselves, not about you. And every comment that I get, or like rude message or something on the internet, or things people say to me, it's become so clear of like, that says a lot about you, person who said that, like in my mind. And it goes
Yeah,
through that lens that, like, what's it called? Like the rejection sensitivity. Like
yeah,
I used to
yeah,
have that very, very much as a people pleaser and as like do everything right, especially with social media. That helps a lot because
yeah.
people have a lot of things to say. It really, I got desensitized, and I feel like I was able to pass that on to my kids in a big way, and that's a really big gift because that lets you live your life authentically.
Definitely, and that's something I've learned, because obviously, like I mentioned to you, like before we started the podcast, I am a people pleaser in recovery. I've struggled with people pleasing my whole life, and to an extent, I've kind of like watered myself down and not really spoken my truth, I guess is the best way to, because I'm so caught up in saying what I need to say to be liked or seen as a good person, as somebody who's helpful and supportive and caring, that I don't
Yes.
necessarily always say what I'm thinking. And I feel like now, whereas like before, I don't suffer from like RSD, like rejection sensitivity disorder, but I do struggle with rejection quite badly. And before,
Yeah.
I would like it would literally make me die inside, thinking like of saying something that someone might disagree with. Whereas
Yeah.
now I've got to a point where I kind of use that as a qualifier. And it's like, well, if you don't
Mhm.
like what I've got to say and my opinions and anything like that, then you're not my people. So it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that. It's like a tool now, It's like,
Yeah.
oh, this is how I vet people that I want to be near their energy.
Yeah. And people are always gonna say hurtful and nasty things because not everybody agrees with everything, but everybody else on the planet does, because the world would be very boring if that was the case. And
Yes.
you can't please everybody, because when you try to please everybody, you please nobody, including yourself.
Yes. Yeah. It's a very hard thing for people pleasers to learn, and it took me a very long time to even stop saying I strive for 100% satisfaction when it came to business. I used to say that 100% satisfaction. Then I was like, 99, like 99%. And then like it took me this is probably like 10 years ago where I finally came to the 99% conclusion. And then over time it was like, this is dumb. Like, I cannot please 99% of people. People are so difficult,
Yeah.
and then it was like, if I'm doing a good job, that has to be enough for me. That basically is a work in progress.
Yeah.
But I'm much closer to that than the 100%. Okay, 99%. No.
But again, isn't that just life though? Is it, we're all constantly just walking around as a work in progress. Nobody's ever fully
Yes.
fixed or fully healed. We're just kind of doing the best with what we can at that particular moment in time, and trying to be more aware of the things that we know we struggle with, and just do
Yes.
better.
I don't want to be fully fixed. I
No.
don't want to be fully fixed because I think like part of what I've learned is like all my quirks and all the like little things I have, they make me who I am. So like yeah, I'm always working on myself to be a better person for sure, and I have so much growing to do and healing. But like so much of the things that we've gone through really make us who we are, not just like in that like cliche quote way,
Yeah.
but in the way that like I notice other people, or in the way that I kind of will do the opposite of what I feel, because I know that I have to always like pull back the other way. Like there's so many ways that working on healing intentionally, because I know I have to work on things, make me a person that I want to be. So I never want to get to the point where I'm like, oh well, I don't need to be intentionally working on things. So
Yeah.
cheers to being works in progresses.
Exactly. And like for me, I'm somebody who, like, I don't necessarily like struggle, but I welcome struggle, because from struggle comes growth. And
Yeah.
like you say, when you're trying to work on things, it's making you the person. It's giving you the resilience. It's giving you the confidence that you need to do things that are more authentic, rather
Yeah.
than trying to be more like everybody else, and things like that. And I find that for me, and in my experience of like the people I spoke to on this podcast, that struggle gives everybody purpose, because
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, and I'm not saying that all struggle does this, because I know for some people they never get out of their struggle, they're not in a position to be able to pull themselves out. But for
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, most people take the thing that they've struggled with and apply that to helping other people in the same situations that they've already been able to work through. And I think that is a beautiful way of repurposing all of the crap that we've been through in our life and dealt with.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think for me, it's kind of funny because I always, like from the beginning of my adulthood, was on that mission. Like, I'm going to turn my pain into power. And that was who I was, And
Yeah.
now on the other side of rebuilding, it was like I got to the point where it's like I never want to help anyone ever again. I hate people. I never want to do anything for anyone. That was during the burnout phase. And then when it was like, what do I want to do with my life? Like when I had this like slate in front of me, and it was like, of course, I want to help people in pain. I want to turn my pain into a purpose in a very different way than I did
Yeah.
it then. But that's what makes life meaningful to me. So I felt in a way like I lost everything that I had done that made my life meaningful, which was like building a school where it was like emotionally very safe place for kids, where kids are really seen for who they are. And I did that, and helping people get the mental health help that they need. And I did that, and it was like being a really good mother and giving my kids everything that they need to be successful and healthy people. And I was doing that, and then like everything was taken away from me, and I'm like, I don't know what to do anymore. Like I didn't want to help anyone, but I also was like, I don't have these tools anymore. And then
Yeah.
choosing it very intentionally from a healthy place, not in a I need to save everyone way, but in a way of like, oh, this is actually who I am. This is actually what I want to do with my life. It's beautiful. Like I see that the work that I do, like just even all the people that I've been able to talk to and meet that have been through similar journeys and giving each other hope and making people feel like they're less alone. Like it's so beautiful. And it's not because it's like my identity and it gives me like, all my meaning in life, but it makes everything so like I see it in such a way of like, yeah, that's such a beautiful base to reach out to other people from. That's such a like beautiful way to take everything that I've learn and then be able to connect with people that I never would have been able to before I went through, everything that I have so far.
Yeah. Love that. It's a really good way of looking at it. Um, I had a question in my head and it's just completely gone.
Love
I,
when that
I,
happens.
I was so like in there listening to what you had to say. I just completely lost it.
You're a very good listener, so.
Um, I try. But yeah, I think going back to like some of the things you were saying before, you when you describe yourself back when you were sort of going through it, it sounds like you were an absolute force of nature. Like it sounds like honestly, it sounds like you were like some kind of superhero. So have you found a way of kind of balancing that now you're challenging your energy, like channeling your energy into like what works for you and what you want to be channeling it into rather than what everybody else needs.
That is a great question because that's been a huge thing for me. So I definitely have been given gifts that allow me to do a lot very well in a very little amount of time in the past. And I saw that. And that's the thing, like people around me saw that too. And it was like, ooh, she spins straw into gold, keep on spinning. And even when I was like, I can't do this anymore, it was like just a little more, a little more, a little more. Like it's not such a big deal, and it really wasn't such a big deal. Except everything on top of all of each other, and also being a human, and like actually needing like having emotional needs and dealing with a lot of difficult things in my life along the way, and like not really having support with those things. Everything took a toll, but like coming from being able to do so much and then slowly breaking down, my brain literally stopped working where my sentences started to slur, and I would go offline constantly, like constantly dissociating and lose my train of thought. And I felt like devastated. Like it was like I can't think anymore. I can't do anymore. I become exhausted. There was a tremendous grief for me. And honestly, I'm still mourning parts of that now because I need so much sleep. I need a very slow pace at life. I get overwhelmed very quickly. I I literally need to live like so far away from where my children are, and I can't handle that much input and people. Like my nervous system is just not the same anymore.
Yeah.
And I definitely like I see my brain like able to like do things that I was able to in the past for a short amount of time, and then I need so much rest because the amount of things I was doing were kind of superhuman, and I wasn't allowing it's too much for like a body, for like a human
Yeah.
body to do. It wasn't getting the rest and everything else that it needed. So now it's like I'm paying for all that all these years later, and I do struggle with like feeling sometimes like I can't believe I'm like a fraction of the person that I used to be, or like how could I not be able to do these things? How do I get so tired out so easily? How do I get so overwhelmed with like like my nervous system gets overwhelmed with loud noises still, or lots of stimulus, or like a lot of expectations on me, and I love the slow pace, but a lot of times I struggle with that like that dopamine of like doing so much and getting so much done, and like wow, like this is amazing. Like it
Yeah.
was there was a lot of aliveness in that feeling, and it's instead finding the life in the stillness, and finding a life like inside of myself, being able to spend time alone, find meaningful connection at such a much slower pace. And sometimes it's really hard for me to tolerate because I as much as like I need the rest so badly and like I enjoy so many parts of it, sometimes it's like my brain is like productivity, productivity. I have so many things, so many things I want to do, I want to do, I want to do, but then my body tires out, and I listen to my body.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to change so drastically. It helped, unfortunately, that like I had no choice, and that's one thing like I wish people knew. Like if you just keep on going and you override everything, it really is destroying your body and your nervous system and your capacity. You're just going to only see the receipt later. It's not like you're just like powering through and pushing through, because I have all those receipts now. And I have both like grief and gratitude at the same time for those things, because I'm so grateful for the pace of my life, that it's slow and it's beautiful and there's lots of peace, and I'm able to travel and make meaningful connections, and have this much like more like living and present pace
Mm.
of life. And then there's also like there's a lot of limitations that like I can't live a regular normal like normal whatever normal is overrated and everything like that, but like I couldn't sit for so many hours at like this type of job, and or like put so much focus on one thing for a certain amount of time like I used to be able to. Like even when I work on my business, it has to be in much slower chunks, smaller pieces spread over much more time,
Yeah.
and that could be frustrating for me. But I always come back to like when I work through it, and it's like it's okay. I feel the loss, and there is a certain loss to it, but then there's also like the cost of that and the peace that I have now. And it's a fight. There have been times I recently hired a coach. Paid a lot of money to be part of like a coaching program. It's very popular these days.
Mm.
And I started doing it, and my anxiety went through the roof. I couldn't sleep. I felt like I was gonna vomit. My whole body was like short circuiting. And after like doing a lot of introspection, a lot of time alone with my thoughts and journaling and figuring out, I realized that it's not the right thing for me. Like I don't need that like motivation mindset of like you can do anything, and I got da da da, and like doing the mantras and saying the things and checking way more things off my list, and because I could do those things
Yeah.
technically speaking, but that isn't where the health lies for me. And
Yeah.
so I literally spent over $10,000, and I just let it go to the garbage, and I quit the program. And it was one of the best things I've done for myself, because it was like that's a expensive price for me to learn. Well, I want to say it's an inexpensive price for me to learn what my body needs and what is good for me. And instead of like keep on pushing, pushing, pushing past that discomfort, it was like I chose myself again in that little moment, because I don't like to fail things. I don't like to mess up. Like I still have that like perfectionist little part of me that's like,
It
what do you
never
mean?
really
This is
goes
who you
away.
are. No, and like the extremely high standards for myself. And it's a constant battle to remind myself that like a high standard for myself isn't output, it's quality of life.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Because it's like we look at people who do like extreme sports and bodybuilding, and we can see exactly how much sort of toll their body is taking because of what they're doing. But when it comes to like how much we're pushing our minds and our mental health, we tend to just kind of like brush it under the carpet a little bit and forget like our
Yeah.
brain isn't, yes, it's a supercomputer and it's very, very powerful, but it's not there to be just used and abused and not taken care of. And it's so, so important to like you say, like even though you know you could do all that stuff, you know now that you're better off like choosing yourself and working in small chunks and not pushing for that kind of lifestyle again because of all the damage that's been done in the past.
Yeah. And I think, like you saying with the sports, I do think of that because when I was in treatment, there was like a lot of NFL players in some of the programs that I was in. And you saw, there's a lot of emotional stress with
Mm,
that kind of pressure also. But there's like a physical damage that happens over the years with all the concussions and the body checks and everything like that.
yeah,
And but at the time a player often is like in their 30s, it's like their body is done. It's over. It's finished.
yeah,
And it's kind of like I did that to my brain. I was like an athlete in some ways with my brain, and I pushed and pushed and pushed way past what like human capacity is. And then it just got to a breaking point where it's like the damage has been done to that brain. So now how do I nurture it, heal it, let it rest? And like, I'm never going to be able to undo the wear and tear that I put on it. And that's okay. Like, it also sharpened my brain in certain ways and made my soul really like enriched in certain ways. Like, it gave me a lot of years of life and learning in a compact amount of time. And so I need to very, very mindfully choose how to kind of nurture that brain and take care of it because I did that athlete level, not just, well, damaged a certain way, on it.
yeah. So, wrapping things up, what would you say to somebody who was kind of in your position, or like while you were doing all the damage? Like, what would you wish somebody had kind of said to you back then, if you'd have been in a position to listen?
Yeah, I wish someone would have taken my hands and looked me in the eyes and said, I see you. I see behind these eyes the pain and the struggle and the like cry for help, and to listen to that cry. Like, don't ignore it. Do the brave thing. Do the thing that feels impossible, because if you stay stuck where you are, you're going to live the rest of your life with that stuckness and that pain, and you're going to die with that. And that is devastating. What feels impossible, what felt impossible to me then, if I could have had someone to take my hand and say, Suri, you need to save your life. You need to do this for yourself. You need to do this. There's air to breathe on the other side. Like, I don't know anyone who left toxic environments and situations and chose themselves and said I shouldn't have done that. I don't know anyone who ever is like, of course there's grief and there's loss, and I can never be like, oh yeah, just do this, it's so easy. Like, I can't even like touch the iceberg of the grief and loss. But it doesn't come anywhere near to choosing life. So if you can choose life, if someone would have said, sorry, choose life, this is you're like, you're killing yourself. I wish people would know the toll that it's taking on them. Like, it doesn't just stop when you stop. It doesn't go away. It really takes a toll on your body, on your mind, on your nervous system. And it's like, if there's any way, even if it doesn't feel like there's a way, like, take your superhuman strengths and whatever like people pleasing you have and whatever like high performing, high energy, anything, put all those resources to taking care of yourself. I wish someone could have convinced me of that at
Yeah,
the time before I burned completely to the point of no return, because there's so much life on the other side of where we think we're trapped and there's no way out. And if we're living in a life that we don't, it's not a life worth living, nothing's going to change until we really make drastic changes and make a life worth living. I wish someone could have looked me in the eye and said, Suri, there's a life worth living. Do whatever it takes to get it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very powerful way of looking at it, and I think it's one of them, isn't it? You've got to be in a position where you're willing to accept that advice, but on the other hand, I think there's a lot of power in, like you say, somebody just taking your hands and saying, "Look, I see you, and I can see how much you're struggling, and you need to let other people in to help, and you need to put yourself first." And it's a very difficult position to be in on like
Yeah,
both sides, I would imagine, because obviously as somebody who sees somebody else struggling, it's hard to watch as well. And then as
it
the
is.
person struggling who sometimes doesn't even have a clue that they are struggling until it's too late.
Yeah. I think most people feel like I'm trapped. There's no way out. They have all the reasons why they can't. And those reasons are usually valid. They
Yeah,
are. But also there's still more than we can see when we're in those situations. Like those reasons are true and there is tons of pain and loss and fear and loneliness and confusion and struggle and so many things that like are kind of impossible. And it's true, but still all of those things are worth it for a life of freedom, of living, of everything you're able to do once you choose yourself.
yeah. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to me. I've really enjoyed hearing about your story, and like everything you've said kind of resonates on some kind of level, although obviously our stories are quite different. But thank you so much for being vulnerable enough to share that with me and everybody listening. Do you want to tell everybody a little bit more about what you do in your business, and how they can sort of connect with you and learn more about what you do and how your business works?
Thank you. And thanks for having me. It's really nice to connect. Yeah, you're generally a really good listener, and I can feel the understanding of everything as I talk. So thank you. I can be found at on Instagram at After the Burn Co. And I on my website aftertheburn.co. And what I've done is I created courses for healing, different healing tools based on my experience both as a therapist, but mostly from my many years of experience as a patient. So having that, kind of training and research and understanding, but then also the lived experiences of what works for me, different boundary setting tools, and like a lot of it is like working through not just like, okay, here's what you do, but like understanding why these things happen and working through those things. So different tools that people can use for healing, things that I wish that I had had back then. And yeah, I really welcome connection. I've been able to meet so many nice people through my page on Instagram and at TikTok after the burn.co. People that have been in similar experiences or feel stuck in places or have, you know, managed to leave situations that aren't helpful to them. And for me, connecting with people like that has been so healing and it's given me so much joy. So I welcome meeting lots of more new people along the way.
Amazing. And again, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who is listening to this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And yeah, head over to Instagram. The links will be in the description. So thank you. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I know these conversations aren't always easy to sit with, so we really appreciate you sticking through it. If you want to keep the conversation going, you can join our Discord community at www.haleyryan.co.uk/Discord, and we'll see you next week.